By midnight, 9 wolves had formed a dark circle between Jonas Hale's cabin and his barn. Their breath rose pale beneath the moon. Snow covered the yard, but their tracks cut through it in restless lines around both buildings. None of the animals wasted a step. Inside the barn, horses kicked their stalls while 3 young calves cried from a wooden pen. The sound carried clearly into the cabin. One lower door had already begun splitting where the frightened cattle pressed against it. Jonas stood at the cabin window with a rifle, unable to cross 40 yards of open ground without entering the pack. Every animal he owned waited beyond them. His neighbor Ed Turner stared at the wolves and said the animals in the barn would never survive until morning. Jonas moved the kitchen table, lifted a square wooden hatch, and revealed stone steps descending beneath the floor. Ed stopped speaking. All summer he had laughed while Jonas dug a tunnel from the cabin to the barn. Now the man who had called it a coward's road was the first one asking whether they could use it. The Hale Ranch stood near Bitter Creek in Wyoming territory during the autumn of 1887. The cabin occupied a low rise, while the barn stood 40 yards north where the ground became level. On calm days, the distance meant nothing. During a winter storm, those 40 yards could become a blind field of snow, ice, and wind. Jonas lived there with his wife Beth and their 11-year-old daughter May. They kept cattle, 6 horses, laying hens, and whatever injured animal May convinced her parents could recover. Jonas had grown up on the same land and believed he understood every direction from which trouble might arrive. The previous winter proved him wrong. It began with clear stars and changed before Jonas finished his evening coffee. A sudden ground blizzard struck after dark while a pregnant mare was struggling inside the barn. Jonas heard her calls through the wind. Jonas left the cabin with a lantern and lost sight of the barn before he had taken 20 steps. The wind extinguished the flame, and snow erased his footprints almost as quickly as he made them. He followed a fence rope to the barn, but arrived after the mare had injured herself against a stall. The mare survived. Her foal did not. Jonas carried the small body outside after sunrise and buried it beyond the cottonwoods. Jonas understood that no fence, lantern, or knowledge of the yard could guarantee a safe crossing in every storm. When the snow melted, he drove 2 stakes into the ground. One stood beside the cabin. The other stood inside the barn. A string marked the shortest line. Beth asked what the line between them meant. Jonas answered, "Next winter, the weather will not decide whether I can reach the animals." He planned a narrow tunnel beginning beneath the cabin pantry and ending below the barn's feed room. It would be tall enough for an adult to move, while bent forward and wide enough to carry a grain sack. The idea sounded simple when drawn with charcoal on a board. In the ground, it required months of digging, timber, stone, drainage, and more patience than Jonas expected. Every foot of progress created another wagon of earth. Ed Turner rode over on the first morning and found Jonas standing waist-deep inside a trench. May was lifting dirt with a bucket and rope. Ed asked whether he was building a cellar or preparing his own grave. Jonas explained the tunnel, and Ed laughed hard enough to remove his hat. He said a rancher afraid to cross his own yard should move somewhere with gentler winters. Jonas kept digging. By the end of the week, the story had traveled to the store at Bitter Creek. Customers began calling the project Hale's Burrow and asking whether Jonas planned to spend winter like a prairie dog. Even people who respected him believed the labor made little sense. A covered walkway would have been faster. A stronger rope line would have been cheaper. Jonas had already tried ropes and lanterns. He wanted a path that wind could not touch. Beth supported the idea, but she refused to let determination replace good construction. She asked Frank Ward, the most experienced carpenter nearby, to inspect the first section. Frank had supported mine entrances before returning to ranch work. Frank climbed into the trench, pressed both hands against the walls, and immediately found 3 problems. The soil held more moisture than Jonas realized. The roof supports stood too far apart. The cabin end lacked fresh air. Any one of those faults could become deadly. Frank warned that a tunnel could become more dangerous than any storm if one section collapsed. Jonas disliked hearing that half his work needed changing. Beth reminded him that the tunnel was meant to protect life, not protect his pride. The following morning, Jonas removed the weak supports and began again. He and Frank placed heavy timber frames closer together and locked each one with cross braces. Each frame received a number before the earth covered it. A shallow gravel channel ran beneath the plank floor to carry seepage away from the cabin. 2 narrow air pipes rose beside fence posts where snow would be less likely to cover them. Wire screens kept mice and loose straw outside. Strong doors closed both ends so fire, smoke, or a loose animal could not travel through the passage. May painted a white line along one wall to guide anyone moving through without a lamp. She also tied a rope from end to end, because she remembered how her father had reached the barn during the blizzard. Jonas carved small shelves into the stone and placed a covered lantern on every third one. The tunnel was not elegant. It smelled of clay, pine pitch, and the cold earth beneath the ranch. It was also stronger, drier, and safer, because Jonas had allowed another man to challenge his first design. In June, 3 days of rain delivered the first real test. Water ran from the barn roof until the yard became soft enough to swallow boots. Water entered through an unfinished section near the barn and filled the drainage channel with brown mud. Ed found Jonas carrying buckets from the passage and announced that the underground river had arrived on schedule. Jonas wanted to answer with anger, but the water had already made the stronger argument. He raised the barn entrance, added another stone drain, and packed clay around the outer supports. During the next rain, the floor remained dry. Beth left a white cloth over the drain and found no mud on it. By August, the final timber went into place and the trench above the tunnel was filled. Grass seed covered the scar across the yard, though the pale line remained visible until winter. Jonas tested both doors, every brace, each lantern, and the rope May had tied along the wall. Frank repeated the inspection without warning him first. Beth carried a basket of eggs from the barn to the pantry without stepping outside. She emerged beneath the kitchen floor and said the passage was ugly, uncomfortable, and exactly what Jonas had promised. May began using it to reach 3 orphaned calves she fed before school. They knew her footsteps and cried whenever she was late. She rang a small tin cup at the cabin end, and the calves soon learned to follow the sound through the tunnel. Jonas allowed the practice because an animal that entered calmly would be easier to move during an emergency. Ed saw the calves emerge beneath the pantry and said Jonas had finally built the world's longest animal hole. May asked whether he would still laugh if the tunnel saved them. Ed answered that he would apologize on the day wolves learned to open barn doors. The first snow arrived early in November. For several weeks, the tunnel served only ordinary purposes. Jonas carried feed during storms. Beth collected eggs. May visited her calves without putting on a heavy coat. The convenience did not end the jokes, but it made Jonas care less about them. Then the elk herds moved south earlier than usual, and deer tracks disappeared from the low country. Even rabbits became difficult to find near Bitter Creek. Coyotes came closer to the chicken house. Wolves began following cattle along the outer range. Frank found the remains of a young steer 6 miles north and counted tracks from at least 7 wolves. The pack was large, hungry, and moving closer to settled land each night. Its tracks crossed older tracks without ever turning north again. Jonas reinforced the barn doors and moved the youngest animals into interior pens. He also checked the tunnel vents after every snowfall and kept fresh oil in each lantern. Ed Turner said wolves preferred weak cattle and would avoid any ranch with dogs, rifles, and people. Jonas agreed that wolves usually avoided people. He also knew hunger could make usual behavior a dangerous promise. On a bitter afternoon in January, Ed and his 16-year-old son Cole appeared at the Hale gate. They led a bleeding heifer between their horses while snow began falling behind them. 4 deep cuts marked the animal's left side. Wolves had attacked the animal near Bitter Creek and followed until Ed fired his last cartridge. The heifer could not travel another 5 miles to the Turner property. Jonas opened his barn, cleaned the wounds, and placed her in a stall away from the other cattle. The smell of blood remained, despite fresh straw. He told Ed and Cole to remain for the night because the snowfall had already hidden the road. Ed accepted shelter without making another joke about the tunnel. Shortly after dark, the dogs began barking toward the north fence. The horses answered from the barn, striking their stalls in a sudden wave of panic. Hanging tools shook against the walls. Jonas looked through the kitchen window and saw the first wolf move past the woodpile. Within minutes, the entire pack had gathered around the scent of blood coming from the barn. If you enjoy stories where careful preparation matters more than loud confidence, take a moment to like this video and subscribe. The wolves had arrived, and the tunnel was about to face the danger everyone had dismissed. Jonas counted 9 animals moving between the buildings and along the outer fence. They did not charge the cabin or throw themselves against solid doors. They circled, tested the wind, and searched patiently for the weakest entrance to the barn. Hunger had made them cautious, rather than reckless. The heifer's blood had soaked into Ed's saddle blanket, which hung in the outer feed shelter. 2 wolves entered the shelter while the others watched the horses through gaps in the boards. Inside, frightened cattle pushed against a lower door that opened toward the yard. The wooden bar bowed with every impact. Jonas knew the wolves could not break a sound barn door, but the cattle might break it from within. Once the animals scattered into the yard, panic and darkness would do more damage than the pack. Horses could break legs before reaching the fence. He moved the kitchen table and lifted the tunnel hatch. Cold air rose from below, carrying the smell of earth and lantern oil. Beth filled 2 lanterns while May brought the coil of spare rope kept beside the pantry. Ed stared into the passage he had mocked all summer. He asked whether it was truly safe beneath the frozen yard. Jonas answered, "Safer than walking over it." Cole wanted to follow, but Jonas told him to remain with Beth and May until the barn was secure. Jonas entered first with a lantern and rifle. Ed followed with an axe, rope, and a heavy wooden brace. They closed the cabin door behind them so nothing could enter the house through the passage. The tunnel carried every sound from the barn through the earth. The passage felt less like an escape route than the inside of a drum. Hooves struck wood. Chains rattled. Above them, wolves moved across the frozen ground without making a sound they could hear. Halfway through, Ed's lantern went out when his coat caught the handle. May's white line and guide rope led him forward until Jonas reached the next covered lamp. The small precaution everyone had ignored became the difference between moving quickly and crawling blind. At the barn end, Jonas listened before unlocking the heavy door beneath the feed room. Nothing stood directly above the hatch. They entered the barn and closed the tunnel door behind them. The horses calmed slightly when human voices reached them, but the cattle continued pressing toward the yard. Jonas and Ed forced the lower door back into place and dropped the new brace across its center. Iron brackets held both ends against the wall. A hoof struck the wood from inside. On the opposite side, claws scraped near the bottom gap. Ed looked at Jonas and understood that the wolves had indeed found a way to test the door. The wounded heifer lay trembling in her stall, while the smell of blood filled the enclosed air. Ed covered her eyes with a folded cloth. Jonas covered her wounds again and packed clean cloth beneath the bandages. In the side pen, May's 3 calves pulled against their gate and cried toward the cabin. The outer feed shelter shared one thin wall with their pen. Each impact from the wolves shook loose dust from the boards. Jonas decided to move the calves through the tunnel before the thin wall failed. They were small enough to fit, but fear could still stop them. Ed doubted any frightened calf would enter a dark hole beneath the barn. Jonas opened the tunnel door and struck the small tin cup hanging beside it. From the cabin end, May heard the signal and began ringing the matching cup she used at feeding time. The first calf lifted its head. May called through the passage, and the familiar sound traveled beneath the yard. Jonas guided the calf toward the steps without pulling its neck or forcing its feet. It entered the tunnel, heard May's voice, and began moving toward the cabin. Its hooves sounded small and fast beneath the planks. The second calf followed. The third refused and backed into the weakening pen. A board cracked behind it, opening a narrow gap into the outer shelter. A gray muzzle appeared through the break, and the calf threw itself against Jonas. Teeth snapped once before the boards closed again. Ed swung the flat side of his axe against the boards, driving the wolf back without opening the wall further. Jonas wrapped one arm around the calf's chest and turned it toward the tunnel. May rang the cup again. The calf recognized the sound, entered the passage, and disappeared safely beneath the barn. Beth closed the cabin hatch after all 3 calves emerged into the pantry. May sat on the floor among them, holding the feeding cup while wolves crossed the yard above her. In the barn, Jonas and Ed reinforced the broken wall with the empty calf gate. The pack could no longer reach the animals through the outer shelter, but the horses remained terrified, and their movement threatened to tear loose another stall. Jonas covered the nearest windows so the horses could no longer see wolves passing outside. Darkness calmed them more quickly than shouting. Ed moved from stall to stall, speaking calmly to animals that had known his voice for years. The pounding slowed. For the next hour, the men remained inside the barn while the pack searched every wall. Jonas checked each latch twice. They did not fire blindly through boards because a frightened bullet could travel toward the cabin. Instead, Jonas opened a narrow loft shutter facing away from the house. He fired one shot into a bare patch of frozen ground beyond the nearest wolves. The sound scattered the pack toward the fence, but hunger brought several animals back within minutes. Ed struck a hanging iron rim with a hammer while Jonas fired a second warning shot. Human voices, metal, and gunfire turned the barn from silent prey into a place the wolves could no longer approach safely. The animals finally stopped testing the doors. The pack withdrew beyond the woodpile and watched through the falling snow. Near dawn, the wounded heifer stood and drank from a bucket. The wolves finally moved north along the creek, searching for easier food. Jonas waited another half hour before opening the barn door. Fresh tracks surrounded the building, crossed the yard, and passed directly over the buried tunnel. Some prints stood above the place where May had painted her white line. Not one print entered the safe path beneath them. Jonas and Ed returned to the cabin underground, carrying the empty rifles and the axe between them. The 3 calves had overturned a flour tin, scattered potatoes, and fallen asleep beside the warm stove. Beth looked at the mess and said the pantry had survived worse guests. May asked Ed whether wolves had finally learned to open barn doors. Ed removed his hat and answered, "They came close enough for me to owe your father an apology." Jonas told him the tunnel had not defeated the wolves by itself. Strong doors, calm animals, May's training, Frank's braces, and Beth's insistence on safe construction had all mattered. Jonas had supplied only one part. The tunnel only allowed every useful part of that preparation to reach the place where it was needed. Ed said that sounded like a long way of accepting an apology. Jonas poured coffee and said it was the only way he knew. When the weather cleared, neighbors followed the wolf tracks to the Hale ranch. They found the barn damaged, the livestock alive, and 3 calves still occupying the kitchen. Nobody called the passage Hale's Burrow that morning. Frank inspected every timber after the ground thawed and found no movement in the reinforced frames. He replaced one damp plank before it could weaken. Jonas repaired the outer shelter, added stronger bars, and lowered the calf pen away from the thin wall. He did not claim the tunnel made his ranch safe from every danger. It had solved one specific problem. It gave people a protected way to reach the barn when the yard became unsafe. Ed never dug a tunnel on his own property because the rocky ground made one impractical. Instead, he built a covered passage to his lambing shed and reinforced every lower door before the next winter. Other families chose solutions that matched their land, rather than copying Jonas without thought. Some added rope lines. Some moved young animals closer to the house. Others strengthened weak feed shelters. The lesson that spread through Bitter Creek was not that every ranch needed a tunnel. It was that laughter did not make an unlikely danger impossible. Years later, May still remembered the night she sat among 3 calves, while wolves walked across the roof of their hidden road. She could hear every step. She remembered her father entering the earth without knowing whether the barn wall would hold. Most of all, she remembered that preparation had not looked brave while people were laughing. It looked brave only after the danger arrived, and everyone else needed the path Jonas had built. Courage saved the animals that night, but courage reached them through a tunnel dug months before fear entered the yard. Would you have helped Jonas build the tunnel, or would you have laughed with the rest of Bitter Creek? Share your answer in the comments. Then like this video and subscribe for more stories about preparation, courage, and survival in the American West.